The bank manager didn't look at me when she spoke. She stared straight at my mother instead, smiling politely, professionally, as if I wasn't even standing there. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, fingers folded over the desk, "but your daughter's signature authority has been revoked." Revoked. Like I was an expired coupon. Like I had never mattered. My mother didn't look at me either. She adjusted her scarf, the one she always wore when she wanted to appear calm and superior, and sighed loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear. "I tried to tell her," she said. "But she's emotional. She doesn't understand how these things work." A man behind us cleared his throat. Someone else shifted uncomfortably. I could feel their eyes on my back, curious, judging, entertained. I stood there with my purse still over my shoulder, my hand still clutching the folder of statements I had printed that morning. My name was on every single page. But suddenly none of that mattered, because my mother had decided, publicly, confidently, that I no longer belonged in my own account. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words stuck. My throat burned, and my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "Mom," I finally said quietly. "What are you talking about?" She turned to me then, slowly, deliberately, with that same look she'd used my entire life, whenever she wanted to remind me who had power. "Don't do this here," she said softly. "You're embarrassing yourself." The bank manager finally glanced at me, just for a second, with something like pity. That was when my mother leaned forward and added, almost casually, "She was never supposed to have full access anyway. I created the account. I can remove her." The room felt like it tilted. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that she was lying. And worse than that, they didn't know what I had already done. I didn't cry. That's what surprised me the most later, not in the moment, but afterward, when I replayed it all in my head. The way my hand stayed steady. The way my voice didn't shake when I asked the bank manager one simple question. "Can you show me the paperwork?" I said. My mother laughed, actually laughed, as if I'd just asked something ridiculous. "Oh, honey," she said, placing her hand over mine like she was comforting a child. "You don't need to see it. I handled it." Handled it. That word again. The bank manager hesitated. Just barely. I noticed because I've always noticed things like that. The half-second pauses, the subtle glances people think don't matter. "I can print the authorization history," she said carefully. "But as of this morning, only one signer remains." My mother smiled wider. "See," she said to me. "This is why I told you not to come." I felt something shift inside my chest then. Not anger yet, not grief, something colder. Something observant. Because what my mother didn't realize was that she'd made a mistake. Not legally. Not yet. Emotionally. She'd humiliated me in public. She'd erased me in front of strangers. She'd spoken about me like I was a problem she'd finally solved. And she did it with the kind of confidence that only comes from believing the truth will never be questioned. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "If that's what the records say." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "You don't believe me?" "I didn't say that," I replied. The bank manager cleared her throat again. "Ma'am, if there's a dispute, we can review the original account creation documents." My mother waved her hand dismissively. "There's no dispute." I met the manager's eyes for the first time. "Actually," I said gently, "there is." The silence that followed felt heavy, uncomfortable, like something important had just cracked. And as my mother straightened in her chair, her voice sharpening, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to think before. She wasn't just trying to control my money. She was trying to rewrite history. And I was standing on the edge of remembering everything she hoped I'd forget. As the printer behind the desk began to hum. Slow, deliberate. My mother leaned toward me and whispered through her smile. "You really don't want to do this." I looked at the machine, at the paper slowly feeding through. And I wondered, which one of us was about to lose something she could never get back? The printer kept humming, but the bank manager didn't reach for the pages right away. She watched them stack slowly, as if she understood that once she touched them, something fragile would break. My mother leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with practiced ease. She looked relaxed now, victorious. The kind of calm that comes from believing the ending is already written. I, on the other hand, felt like I was standing inside a memory I'd avoided my entire life. Because this wasn't really about a bank account. It never was. What I didn't realize then, what took me years to name, was that control feels exactly like care when you've been raised inside it. Growing up, my mother handled everything. Money, paperwork, appointments, permissions. She framed it as protection. You're not good with details, she used to say, smiling like she was doing me a favor. I worry about you, she'd add whenever I questioned her. Let me do it, I'm better at this. And I believed her. For a long time, I believed her. When I got my first job in my 20s, she insisted we open a joint account, just to help you manage things. When my paycheck went in, she showed me how to budget, how to ask before spending, how to explain purchases. I told myself it was normal. When she questioned every withdrawal, every transfer, every receipt, I told myself she cared. When she discouraged me from opening my own account, warning me about fees and mistakes and fraud, I listened. What I didn't notice was how often my name disappeared from decisions that involved my own life. At the bank that day, as the printer finished and went silent, all of that came rushing back. The bank manager finally stood and gathered the pages. These are the original account creation documents, she said carefully, including identification used at the time. My mother's fingers tightened on the arm of her chair. There's no need, she began. I'd like to see them, I said. The manager nodded and placed the stack on the desk between us. My mother didn't look down right away. She looked at me. You're being dramatic, she said quietly. This is unnecessary. I held her gaze. So was revoking my signature without telling me. A flicker crossed her face then, annoyance maybe, or something closer to fear. But it vanished quickly, replaced by that familiar expression of disappointment. I was protecting you, she said. You've been irresponsible lately. I almost laughed, because that was her favorite word. Irresponsible. She used it when I questioned her authority, when I asked for independence, when I tried to step outside the boundaries she'd drawn around me and called safety. The bank manager cleared her throat again. The account was opened 12 years ago, she said. At this branch. My mother nodded sharply. Yes, I remember. And the primary holder at the time was... The manager paused, scanning the page. I felt my pulse in my ears. My mother leaned forward. Me. The manager didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned the document slightly, just enough for me to see. And that's when I saw it. The name. My name. Typed cleanly at the top. Primary account holder. My mother's name was there too, but underneath. Authorized signer. Not the other way around. The room seemed to shrink. My mother's breath hitched. Just barely, but I caught it. That can't be right, she said quickly. I was the one who. The ID used to open the account, the manager continued, her voice steady now. Belongs to. She stopped. Looked up at me. Then back at my mother. We'll need to verify something. My mother stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. There's been some mistake. I didn't move. Because suddenly I remembered. The day we opened the account. I remembered being 22, standing at this same counter, my hands shaking as I handed over my driver's license. I remembered my mother standing beside me, correcting my answers, smiling for the banker. I remembered signing the forms. I remembered thinking, at least my name is on something. What I didn't realize then was that she had spent the next 12 years trying to make me forget that moment ever happened. The bank manager gathered the documents and turned toward the back offices. We'll confirm the identification on file, she said. It won't take long. My mother grabbed her purse. This is harassment, she snapped. You're allowing her to manipulate you. The manager paused. Ma'am, we're just verifying records. My mother turned to me, her voice dropping low. If this doesn't go the way you think, she said, don't expect me to fix it. Fix it. I watched her walk away from the desk, heels clicking sharply against the floor, and I felt something unsettling settle in my chest. Not relief. Not triumph. But the quiet realization that if the truth came out, I wouldn't just be taking back my money. I'd be taking back something she'd built her entire identity on. And I wasn't sure how far she'd go to stop that. As the door to the back office closed behind the manager, my phone buzzed in my purse. A message. From my mother. 3 words that made my stomach drop. You owe me. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't the first boundary she planned to erase today. It was just the one she thought would hurt me the most. I didn't open the message right away. I knew what it would say before I read it, not the words exactly, but the tone. The familiar weight of obligation. The invisible ledger she'd kept my entire life, tallying every favor, every sacrifice, every moment she believed I belonged to her. You owe me. That was always her final argument. The bank lobby felt colder now. Quieter. The people who'd been there earlier had finished their business and left, taking their curiosity with them. All that remained was the hum of fluorescent lights, and the sound of my own breathing. I finally unlocked my phone. Mom, you're making a mistake. Mom, after everything I've done for you. Mom, don't embarrass me like this. Embarrass her. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, and then lowered it. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't be twisted into proof of my ingratitude. What I didn't realize then was how quickly she would shift tactics. She always did. When guilt didn't work, she escalated. The bank manager was gone longer than she'd promised. 10 minutes passed, then 15. With every second, the tension inside me tightened, not because I doubted the truth, but because I knew my mother. She didn't wait quietly when she felt cornered. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't her. It was my aunt. Aunt Lisa, what's going on at the bank? Aunt Lisa, your mother sounds very upset. My chest tightened. She was already making calls. I closed my eyes briefly, memories stacking on top of each other like unpaid debts. Family dinners where my mother spoke for me. Conversations where my feelings were summarized, simplified, dismissed. Moments when I'd tried to explain myself, only to be told I was too sensitive. She was good at this, at turning private control into public concern. My phone lit up again. Cousin Mark, everything okay? Cousin Mark, your mom says you're accusing her of stealing. Stealing. That was new. I exhaled slowly. This was the part she never let me prepare for. The part where she recruited witnesses. Where she framed herself as the wounded party and me as the unstable daughter lashing out. I typed one sentence to my aunt and stopped. Because the truth was complicated. And complicated truths don't travel well through family group chats. Across the lobby, my mother was pacing now, whispering sharply into her phone. She didn't look at me, but I could tell she was talking about me. Her gestures were animated, her expression pinched with indignation. Every so often, she'd glance over, just long enough to remind me she was still watching. What I didn't realize then was that she wasn't just afraid of losing control. She was afraid of being seen. The bank manager finally reappeared. She didn't sit down this time. She stood beside the desk, holding a thin folder in her hands, her posture different, more formal. More careful. Ma'am, she said, addressing my mother first, we verified the identification used to create the account. My mother ended her call mid-sentence. Yes, she said tightly. The primary account was opened using your daughter's government-issued ID, the manager continued. Her signature appears on all original documents. Your authorization was added later. The words hung in the air. My mother laughed, short and sharp. That's not possible, she said. I wouldn't have allowed that. Allowed. The manager didn't flinch. The records are very clear. I felt something inside me loosen then, not triumph, not joy, but validation. Quiet and heavy. My mother turned to me, her voice dropping. You planned this, she said. Didn't you? I met her gaze. No, I said. You just forgot. Her eyes darkened. She stepped closer, close enough that only I could hear her. If you do this, she whispered, don't expect help anymore. Don't expect family. Don't expect me. There it was. The threat she'd always used. Withdrawal of love disguised as consequence. I swallowed. I already don't, I said softly. She recoiled like I'd slapped her. The bank manager cleared her throat again. Effective immediately, she said. Your daughter's signature authority is fully restored. Any changes to this account will require her direct approval. My mother's hands shook. This isn't over, she said, grabbing her purse. You'll regret this. She stormed toward the exit, her heels loud against the floor, leaving behind a silence that felt too big for the room. I stood there, suddenly unsure what came next. Because winning the truth in a bank lobby was one thing. Living with the fallout, that was something else entirely. As I gathered my things, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. Unknown. If you think this ends here, you don't know your mother at all. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. And for the first time that day, I wondered, what had she already set in motion while I was busy reclaiming my name? I didn't go home right away. That was the first decision I made that had nothing to do with her. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands resting on the steering wheel, engine off, phone face down in my lap. My reflection stared back at me from the windshield. Older than I felt, calmer than I expected. I kept thinking about the unknown number. If you think this ends here. What I didn't realize then was that my mother had already begun her next move long before we walked into that bank together. The revocation wasn't the plan. It was the rehearsal. I drove to my apartment and spent the evening in silence, jumping every time my phone buzzed. Messages poured in, cousins, family, friends, even my pastor's wife, all variations of the same question. What's going on with your mom? By midnight, the story had grown teeth. I was ungrateful. I was confused. I was accusing my own mother of things she would never do. I turned my phone off. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it dragged me backward, into childhood rooms, into conversations where my voice went missing halfway through sentences. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. I knew it was her before I opened it. She stood there with a casserole dish in her hands, her face composed, her eyes red like she'd been crying just enough to be believable. I came to make sure you're okay, she said softly. Concern. Care. The performance she perfected. I stepped aside and let her in. She walked through my apartment like she owned it, touching things, straightening pillows, sighing as if everything she saw disappointed her. I didn't sleep, she said. I've been so worried about you. I waited. She set the casserole down and turned to face me. Why are you doing this? She asked. Why are you trying to destroy me? There it was. Not us. Not our relationship. Her. I didn't do anything, I said. I just told the truth. Her mouth tightened. You humiliated me, she said. People are calling. Asking questions. I crossed my arms. The bank verified the records. She waved her hand. Banks make mistakes. I almost smiled. Because what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that after she left the bank, I hadn't gone straight home. I'd gone to the storage unit. The one she'd insisted on paying for all these years. The one she kept the key to. The one she said was just old paperwork. I had gone there because something in me, the quiet, observant part she always underestimated, knew that control requires records. And records leave traces. Inside the unit were boxes of documents, neatly labeled in her handwriting. Taxes, insurance, correspondence, and one thin folder tucked at the back. My name was on it. Inside were copies of forms I'd never seen before. Credit applications, authorization letters, old account modifications, and one document that made my hands shake. A power of attorney, dated 6 years ago, signed with my name, in handwriting that wasn't mine. Back in my apartment, my mother was still talking, listing everything she'd done for me, everything I owed her, everything I was risking. What I didn't realize then, I said slowly, was how much you'd done without telling me. She froze. What does that mean? She asked. I walked to my desk and pulled the folder from my bag. Her color drained as soon as she saw it. Where did you get that? She demanded. You kept it, I said. You just forgot I knew where. She snatched the papers from my hand, flipping through them frantically. This was for your own good, she said. You were struggling. You needed help. I never signed this, I replied. She didn't answer. Because this time, there was no audience to manipulate. No family to call. No manager to intimidate. Just the truth. And the realization settling into her eyes that she hadn't just lost control of an account. She'd left a paper trail. One that could undo everything she'd built. She looked up at me then, not angry, not superior, but calculating. If you take this any further, she said quietly, you'll tear this family apart. I held her gaze, my heart pounding. And I wondered, was she warning me about the damage? Or threatening me with it? She didn't leave after that. She sat down at my kitchen table like she always had, folding her hands neatly in front of her, as if proximity alone could restore authority. This doesn't have to become a spectacle, she said. We can handle it privately. Privately. That word meant something very specific in our family. It meant silence. It meant swallowing. It meant letting things go for the sake of peace. What I didn't realize then, I said slowly, was how often peace had just meant me giving up. Her jaw tightened. You're exaggerating. I slid the power of attorney back across the table. Explain this. She didn't touch it. Instead, she leaned back and sighed, the way she did when she wanted sympathy without accountability. You were overwhelmed, she said. I stepped in. You forged my signature. I did what I had to do. There it was. Not denial. Justification. Something in me hardened then, not into anger, but clarity. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that waits. That afternoon, she called a family meeting. She didn't ask me. She informed me. By evening, my living room was filled with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, all perched on my furniture like judges waiting for testimony. My mother sat in the center, her posture wounded but dignified. She's confused, she told them. The stress has gotten to her. I stood near the window, arms crossed, listening as she rewrote my life out loud. I noticed something then, something small but telling. No one asked me what happened. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering. And I wondered, was that supposed to scare me? Or free me? I didn't respond to the voicemail. That was the third decision I made that finally belonged only to me. I listened to it once, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to hear what wasn't there. No apology. No softness. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just a final attempt to frame abandonment as punishment. You'll never hear from me again. For most of my life, that threat would have shattered me. But something had shifted. What I didn't realize then was that power loses its shape when you stop reacting to it. Days turned into weeks. The legal process moved quietly, efficiently, without drama. The bank finalized everything in writing. My account. My authority. My history restored exactly as it had always been. One afternoon, I received a sealed envelope from the bank. Inside was a certified copy of the original account creation form. At the bottom of the page was my signature. Clear. Unequivocal. Undeniable. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Not because I doubted it, but because I'd spent so many years being told it didn't count. The family fallout came in fragments. An aunt who apologized awkwardly. A cousin who admitted she scared us into believing her. A quiet message from my father that simply said, "I'm proud of you." My mother never contacted me again. But I heard about her. How she told people I'd turned cold. How she said money had changed me. How she avoided details. Because details were never her friend. The last time I saw her was by accident, months later, in a grocery store aisle. She looked smaller somehow. Not weaker. Just unanchored. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in my life, she didn't know what to say to me. I nodded once, not in forgiveness, not in anger, but acknowledgement, and walked away. That night, I sat at my desk and opened a new folder. I labeled it simply mine. Inside were copies of everything, not out of fear, but out of respect for myself. Proof that my memory was real, that my instincts had been right. That quiet doesn't mean powerless. What I didn't realize then, what took me the longest to accept, was that revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like documentation. Sometimes it looks like a bank verifying whose ID created the account. Sometimes it looks like a woman who finally signs her own name without permission. I closed the folder and turned off the light. For the first time in a long time, there was nothing left to prove. Just a future that answered to me. And that was more than enough. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.